Welcome to Cooking from the Cave. I'm Chef Pete Truziak, and today I will be making carne asada with escabeche, which is a pickled vegetable dish that's commonly served in your Spanish restaurants. I'm going to start off by marinating our steak, and our steak we're going to use for this recipe is a skirt steak. It has not been tenderized, and you can ask your butcher to do this for you if you want it to be tenderized. And if you're going to have it be tenderized, you don't need to marinate it. You just need to season with salt and pepper, and you can throw it right on the grill. When they marinate it, what happens is they run it through a machine, and it basically pokes a whole bunch of holes in the skirt steak, separating it, and it gets a little bit longer. I don't like to use that for this recipe. I don't like to have it tenderized. I like to marinate it so I can infuse a whole bunch of flavors into this great tasting steak, and then it echoes throughout the entire dish. We're going to be serving this with the escabeche later on, but I do need to get this marinated because this will take the longest time. Get yourself a blender. I'm going to start off with our acids that we're going to be putting in here. This is 3 whole limes that I've juiced, 2 mangoes that I'm just using the meat for on this, 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar, 3 cloves of garlic, a teaspoon of ancho chili powder. If you didn't have ancho chili powder, I think in some of the other recipes I always comment you could use comment on using paprika or smoked paprika to that effect. A teaspoon of salt, and I have a half cup of olive oil, as well as 2 tablespoons of red chili oil that we're going to pour in here for a little spice. If you don't have the chili oil, very common thing you can do is definitely go ahead and put in some maybe red pepper flakes in with that olive oil, and as this purees up and blends up well, that'll break down and that'll infuse the oil as well as this marinade with a little bit of spice. Whenever using a blender, make sure your hand is on the top. Make sure the top is on fairly tight, and start on a low speed. And then if you need to work yourself up or work the speed up on the blender, go ahead and do so. There's barely anything we have to puree except maybe the garlic cloves. So we'll just let this blend at a real low speed. 2 or 3 more seconds. It's done. We're not looking for any sort of very thin consistency with this. We're just looking for everything to be pureed up. The liquids that are in here will make that already happen. You can see that it's nice and pureed. You don't have any clumps of garlic. That means you're good to go. The next thing I'll do is I'll put my skirt steak in there, pour the marinade over the top, and what I'm using to marinate with is an instant marinator. It cuts your marinating time down in half. Give it a pump about 10 times. We'll give it a good shake. Put it in our refrigerator. And again, the nice thing about these instant marinators, you can either, if you're eating in a very short period of time, you can let it sit in there for 30 minutes or up to 2 hours. I wouldn't go past that. It might become too strong or infused with too much of that flavor from that marinade. So again, about 30 minutes, and then we can get it on the grill. And now we're going to do our escabeche. Escabeche is a wonderful dish. It goes with almost everything. Breakfast, not really, but I think I could serve it for breakfast. It has wonderful vegetable flavor in here, a lot of great herbs in here. I'll talk more on that. In this recipe, the recipe that I'm giving you today, I'm using cauliflower, jalapeno peppers, and baby carrots, as well as oregano, thyme, and bay leaves. In this pot, we're going to be boiling 2.5 cups of rice wine vinegar, 2.5 cups of water. I'm going to add 12 cloves of garlic. I told you, all my favorite things. 2 tablespoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio on those items. Let this come up to a boil, and we will then pour that into our jar. Now, this is a very important thing here, because this jar has to be a canning jar. If it's any other glass vessel, it has a potential of shattering on you. So if you don't have canning jars, what you would do is you would bring this up to a boil, this liquid, Once it comes up to a boil, instead of pouring the hot liquid over the vegetables, we're going to pour the vegetables into the hot liquid. We're going to turn it off, and we're just going to let it steep on our stove. So what that means is we're just going to have no heat on it, and we're just going to let it gradually cool down so that we can then pour it into whatever container we're using. In this case, I got my canning jar here. I'm going to take this liquid, and it's going to go in there. I'm also waiting for this liquid to come up to a boil so I can talk about the herbs. You can use almost any fresh herb except basil, because basil, once it gets hit with that liquid, will turn black, and that's not the goal here. The goal is to make this jar not only look great but also taste great. So I'm going to pack this full of my the herbs. Our liquid is up to a boil right now. I'm going to look in here, and I just want to give it a real quick stir to make sure that none of the salt and sugar has not dissolved. Typically, once it comes up to a boil, the amount of liquid and the very little amount of salt and sugar that's in here, it'll basically dissolve right away. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off. I'm going to dump in about 15 peppercorns, roughly about a teaspoon. I'm going to go ahead and pour this hot liquid into my measuring jar here, which the only reason why I'm using this is because it's easier to pour that right into my canning jar. And then just to be on the safe side so I don't spill anything over and get vinegar all over the cave's floor, I'm going to pour that, put the canning jar in the pot, pour this right up to the top. Make sure you get those garlic cloves in there, and you have a beautiful yet extremely hot jar of escabeche. Again, this can be served with anything. We're going to serve it today with our carne asada. Once we get that grilled and we serve this up, this should be cooled down in time. At this point, I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in the refrigerator. This will, because of the heat in there, will definitely take about 2 hours to cool down. The other word about this is, remember, the jar is very hot. Get some towels to grab hold of so they can easily transfer that into the refrigerator. After 2 hours in the refrigerator, and I've preheated my grill to about 400 degrees, you can go ahead and take the skirt steak out of our instant marinade. And it's going to have a lot of liquid still on it and everything. That's okay. Anything that's left on it will just caramelize nicely, and it'll give you those nice grill marks and also really great color on it. I'm going to give it a little shake though, just to make sure we're not dripping anything. And then we're going to lay it right over the direct heat here. Again, I got the grill set at 400 degrees. This will go really quick because, one, the marinade will make that meat real tender, make the protein strands loosen up a little bit. It'll cook faster, and also the thickness of skirt steak is going to be about 3 to 4 minutes on either side. 4 minutes on one side, you'll start to see the meat darken around the edge there. Also, it's going to turn kind of white as you go higher on the meat itself. So dark on the bottom, and it kind of just pales out as you go to the top of it. Good sign to flip it. You get this great caramelization on the top. You get the great grill lines on there as well. If we were to flip it or rotate it the opposite direction, we'd be able to get the cross marks, but really with this type of cut, that's not so important because of the length of it and also how we slice it. At this point, we'll give it another 4 minutes, and remember, don't move it around a lot, just let it be in one spot. Another 4 minutes on the other side, great markings. At this point, we're going to move this off the heat, put it on our cutting board, and we're going to let it rest. This is where the protein strands, again, they're going to relax. We're going to give it about 5 to 6 minutes over there, and we'll start to slice it up, and I'll show you how to properly slice it so you're not cutting with the grain, you're actually going to cut across the grain. While that's resting, we can go ahead and cook up our tortillas. I like to just lay them right across over the heat. And this is really not any sort of rocket science here. We're just going to let it caramelize enough. You'll start to see them soften up. They'll even change a little colors back there. Give them about 30 seconds per side. You'll see them bubble up a little bit. Flip them over. Just waiting for the others to do that, and I'll continue this process till I get all 10 of them done. Moving on inside now, I'm going to show you how to slice up the skirt steak. I've shown it in other recipes, but just to go over it one more time, the way the grain in the meat runs is it runs from the front here to that side, so the grain is running in this direction. If we cut with the grain, we're going to take our knife and we're going to slice it like so, and then we'll do it again. And I slice it into easily maneuverable or pieces that I can work with. Now, what I'm going to accomplish here is I'm going to take the meat, I'm going to rotate 90 degrees. Now when I slice again in that direction, the knife's going to be on a bias. After rotating the meat 90 degrees, we're now going to cut across the grain, and we're going to cut on a bias so our knife is at an angle, and we're going to give it beautiful thin slices. You can tell you're cutting across the grain because the meat basically falls apart when you go to move it. So let me just show you what that looks like. See, there's all that meat's so tender right now. It's exactly what you want. I find that the best way to do carne asada is to go ahead and plate it up. We got our escabeche in back. Another note about the escabeche, or something to remember, make sure after you let it cool down, you give it about 24 hours before you dig into it. The reason that is because all those seasonings that go into it, that salt, the sugar, peppercorns, all the fresh herbs that were in there really starts to influence the vegetables, and the longer it sits in that vinegar, the stronger, the spicier those jalapenos get, and the more flavorful this wonderful little concoction turns into. Carne asada is done. All we need to do is go get some daiquiris or some Coronas, and we're ready for dinner. So thanks again for watching Cooking from the Cave. I'm Chef Pete Truziak, and I'll see you real soon.